have a notebook here that you've provided with us, and I understand there will be additional documents coming. If you want to just supplement those, I've spoken with your county attorney as able here in the next few days or weeks. I would appreciate that. But I did want to thank you for making the effort to be responsive on relatively short notice here. And thank you for being here with us today. Would you just introduce yourself and have Sharon introduce herself to the committee, please, sir?
I'm Robb Pitts. I chair.
Hang on, let me make sure I got you lit up here. There we go.
All right. I'm Robb Pitts. I chair the Board of Commissioners of Fulton County, Georgia.
All righty. And Sharon?
Good morning. Sharon Whitmore, the county's Chief Financial Officer.
You can pull that microphone closer to you if you want to. We had a little difficulty last meeting. Sometimes the volume's kind of fading in and out a little bit. That will allow us to hear you clearly. And also, this is being streamed live, and so anybody that may be watching on their computers at home will be able to hear the testimony that you give. I am going to start with a couple of formalities here. We have in your folders, ladies and gentlemen, the minutes from our first two meetings. The first one was held on February 9th, 2024. The Secretary of the Senate has prepared these minutes, and maybe a little tedious of a job, but easy because we are recorded, and so it's very easy to verify the accuracy. I did notice, Senator Estevez, we misspelled your name on one of them, I think, and we'll two on both of them. We will correct that. And I told them, you being an attorney, it's going to be hard to slip anything by you on these, so we will correct those spellings as part of any approval of these meetings. Have you all had an opportunity? We sent these out in advance to review these minutes before today. Any committee members need additional time to review them before we take action? All right, then I am open for a motion to approve the minutes of the February 9th, 2024 meeting.
So moved.
All right, I've got a motion by Senator Dolezal. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Senator Kennedy. Any discussion or any review, proposed changes or corrections to the minutes of February 9th? All right, then all in favor, raise your hand. Any opposed, like sign? All right, those are approved. Now turning to the March 6, 2024 meetings. Has everybody had an opportunity to review these thoroughly? All right, is there a motion?
Move to adopt the March 6 minutes as presented.
And with the amendment of the spelling correction, got to accept that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any further discussion on that? And likewise, we will vote. All in favor, raise your hand of approving those minutes. Any opposed? All right, they are unanimously adopted. You'll also notice in your folder just a copy of our Senate committee rules. I put these in here because we did have some questions posed to us from the Fulton County Commission as they were preparing their responses to make sure what their timeliness was and how to object. I would like to state to you, Chairman Pitts and Ms. Whitmore, y'all should be aware that we have confidentiality rules on this committee. If there are any documents responsive to our subpoena that you feel like contain confidential information that should not be disclosed to the public, because we are creating a public record here, please identify those to me, and I will, in accordance with our rules, deem them confidential and shielded from public view. I know that just in conversations with your county attorney, I know Sue has told me there are certain things that she has redacted in these, if anything that dealt with the birth dates, social security numbers, health information of any of the employees of the county. And that is certainly fine. That's what we're trying to accomplish, to make sure that we are protecting documents that should be confidential, but also obtaining the records that we need to complete our investigation, and with the understanding that the vast majority of anything we ask for are in the public domain anyway. These are public government records that should be accessible to the general public, but also to the state Senate to conduct our work here. So thank you, and just let me know before we post anything on the website, any documents, if there are any that you feel like need to be shielded or protected in any way. Fair enough? All righty. Before we get started, I will need to swear each of you in. Mr. Pitts, I'll start with you. If you will raise your right hand, please, sir. Do you swear the testimony that you will give before this committee this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and to the best of your knowledge and ability?
I do.
All right. And Ms. Whitmore, would you likewise? You swear the testimony you'll provide this morning will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Yes.
All right. We have our court reporter present. We'll be making a transcript of all the testimony, and we're happy to share that with you. It will become part of the public record afterwards. If you later want to correct any answers or add information, we welcome that. And I will state before we begin, as we say every meeting, that our Senate website is set up that if anybody from the public has information you think might be relevant to our investigation, feel free to reach out to us and provide any information that could be relevant to us, and let us know if you would like to testify before this committee as our process unfolds throughout the summer and the fall. Mr. Pitts, let me get you just to give us a little brief background. You and I know each other,
Yes,
and I think most people in Fulton County know of you from your long history of public service. If you would tell us a little bit about the position you hold and how long you've been in the chairman's post and any other political service before that, I think it might give some context.
Thank you, Senator, Mr. Chairman. I've been, as you've indicated, been involved as an elected official for many years. I look at Senator Butler, and I kind of count sometimes to figure out just who is still standing. And I'm sorry that you're going to be leaving us. But I began my political career in Atlanta as a member of the Atlanta City Council. I served there for 20 years as a member of the Atlanta City Council. Then I was elected as president of the City Council. I served 4 years as president. Then I moved over to the county, where I served for, I think, 12 years as a member of the commission, as a commissioner. And for the last 7 or 8 years, I have been privileged to serve as chair of the Board of Commissioners of Fulton County.
All right. And as in that position, how often does your commission meet? Is it twice a month?
We
or
meet the first and third Wednesdays of every month.
Okay. Is it part of the duties and responsibilities of the Fulton County Commission to establish the budget for the district attorney's office and some supervision of that office?
We establish the budget for the district attorney as well as all other departments for final approval.
And when you're formulating the budgets, does the district attorney submit to you a budget request for public funding?
The process, and I'll defer to our chief financial officer, but there's a process where the department heads appear before the manager and the finance team to explain their requests, and then from there it comes to us for final approval. We might want to clarify.
So the budgets of all the county departments, including the district attorney's office, are ultimately approved by the county commission?
That's correct.
Okay. Ms. Whitmore, if it's okay with you, I may bounce back and forth between witnesses because I understand, as the chairman just deferred to you, there are areas where you have particular expertise. Okay.
Yes, that's fine.
Brenda, I'm not going to make your life as miserable as you're sitting there thinking right now. Our court reporter is going to try to keep a transcript, but you will occasionally have to go back and forth between witnesses. I will have, I'm going to have Ms. Whitmore later, a direct line of questioning her, but I may periodically let her chime in here, okay? All right. Sharon, tell us a little bit about that, how that budgeting process works.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Pitt's description is the general process. Actually, every department of county government, including constitutional officers and elected officials, submit an annual budget request through our budget development application. Those requests are reviewed, vetted, and verified through our budget office. The county's budget ordinance is designed in a way that the budget is developed and presented to the Board of Commissioners as a recommendation from the Office of the County Manager. So we have a review process that we undertake with the county manager and members of his executive team to review the requests that are presented. Typically, we provide each agency with a base budget figure to start with, and then they are allowed to submit what we call budget enhancements, where they can ask for additional resources to just continue an existing program, to expand an existing program, or to establish a new program or service. We also have a separate process that we run simultaneously as the operating budget for a capital budget requests, and there is a capital budget review committee that receives and vets all of those requests, and they are then in turn taken into consideration at the same time as operating budget requests, because we only have one pool of resources to use, so we consider all of those at the same time. So our constitutional officers and elected officials submit their requests through the same channels. Sometimes they may choose not to come and present to the county manager's office and then choose instead to communicate their budget needs directly with the Board of Commissioners. So that, in a nutshell, is the county budget process.
And when you talk about capital expenditures, is that like new automobiles for police departments, new buildings, new expenditures on things along those other than personnel?
Yes, sir. Rolling stock, heavy equipment, facility renovation, new facilities, facility expansion, all of that would come through our capital portal process.
So when we talk about building a new county jail, that's a capital project.
That is one very significant capital project, yes, sir.
Can you give us just a feel for what the size of Fulton County's annual budget is?
All funds including, all funds included, it's about $1.2 billion.
And do you have readily available what amount of general funds from the county are allocated to the district attorney's office on an annual basis? I guess we'll just talk about this year to start with.
In 2024, the district attorney's allocation was $36.6 million from the general fund.
Okay. Chairman Pitts has tried to explain to me that there are several buckets of funds that are used to fund the district attorney's office. Would you kind of run that through for me as to what additional funding over and above the $36.6 million of general funds from county tax revenues that are allocated to the district
Yes, sir.
attorney?
The district attorney, in addition to the county's general fund resources, also has resources that are available through the confiscated asset forfeiture fund, as well as the victims witness assistance fund, federal asset forfeiture funds, and we keep all of these in separate funds, and then a number of different grants that come through the state and federal grant process. And then since really the middle of 2021, when we developed our spending program for the resources that we received through the American Rescue Act, the district attorney has also had resources available for what we call our Project Orca, which is our court backlog project that was funded out of our ARPA resources.
Okay, let me slow down on that one just a minute. Did you say Project Orca, like an orca whale?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is that acronym, does that stand for something you could help tell us?
It's more, I guess, visual than that. It just was intended to mean that it was a very, an orca is a very large ocean mammal, and the court backlog that we had as a result of the slowdown in the court system during the pandemic was also very large. So the individual who was charged with developing a program to address the court backlog named it Project Orca, but it is our official court backlog reduction program.
And this is funded through federal funds?
Through our ARPA resources, yes, sir.
And the ARPA money was put in to sort of help all the states recover from the COVID epidemic?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you know the amount of ARPA funds that were allocated to the district attorney's office or the Orca project?
I don't have that number available with me today, but I can share it.
And as far as the expenditures of that fund, is that anything that the county commission had authority or discretion over where the money went, how it was spent?
Specifically, is your question specific to the ARPA resources themselves?
Yes.
Yes, sir. They determined where and how our ARPA resources would be utilized. The county executive team made a recommendation, and the Board of Commissioners adopted that recommendation, and we have modified it over the course of time as we have continued to execute on our spend for the ARPA resources.
And one of the areas you allocated some of the ARPA funding was to this Orca project.
Yes, sir. In total, about $75 million is what we allocated to Project Orca.
And who else was allocated funds through the Orca project in addition to the district attorney's office?
Most of the partners from our justice system received funding out of the Project Orca resources. The district attorney's office, the state court, superior court, magistrate court, public defender, the sheriff's department, I believe juvenile court received some. So we took a look across the entire justice system to see where we would need to plug in some additional resources in order to develop a work plan to, bring our backlog that had accumulated, to bring those numbers down.
So if $75 million was applied to the Orca project, do you know what amount of the $75 million went to the district attorney's office?
I don't have the exact dollar amount with me. I can tell you that she did receive funding to cover 75 positions, which was the highest number of positions that were provided across the justice agencies. But I'm sorry, I didn't bring that. I don't have that number with me, and I don't know it off the top of my head.
I'm not certain if we even requested that. I know that you are continuing to compile for me the essentially the ledger or roster of employees employed by the district attorney's office, and I suppose we'll be able to break this out as you compile that data, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do you have any idea how many employees in the district attorney's office now?
I believe she has about 277 employees, plus the positions in Orca, so a little over 300, maybe 340.
And that would include assistant district attorneys and investigators and secretarial help, the entire spectrum of staff.
Yes, sir.
Will the Orca funds expire anytime soon or be exhausted? I know if it came through ARPA, that's sort of winding down at this point, right?
Yes, sir. We are undertaking an effort currently to ramp down our Orca spend within the $75 million that was allotted, and within the general time frame that was provided for the spending to occur, which is 12/31/2024.
So we're at the tail end, the last year of that, huh?
Yes, sir.
The way you described the budget process sounds very similar to the state budget process, where it's almost a continuation budget from the year before, and then there are requests for additions. increases if you need more staff or if circumstances have changed or need to make a capital expenditure?
Yes, sir. I mean, we tend to start from the previous year and build onto that. If a department received funding in a previous year that was not intended to be part of their recurring budget, then we make adjustments for that. That's why I said we provide them with a base budget, so that base budget each year will reflect the ins and the outs from, whatever transpired in the previous year's budget cycle. So if a department received funding for a particular project or purpose that's not intended to happen on an annual basis, then we pull those monies back out and readjust their and realign their base budget.
Okay. How much detail does the district attorney's office provide when they make their annual budget request? Is it fairly itemized by employee, by expenditure type, where it goes?
In our process, we provide them with a line item version of their budget in our budget development application. We provide them with a position summary. So we give them a report of all of their positions, and it's as of a point in time. And they are required to make any corrections to that position summary report, because that becomes the basis for their salary and fringe benefit budget for the base year. And then they are allowed to go in and align the operating portion of their budget in whatever manner suits their operational needs. We do have a couple of object codes that we really do not allow them to deviate much from, because they are necessary to fund things like our risk management fund. So, we have an object code specifically for that. That's a rate times the number of positions that you have. So there's no deviation there. But they do have the ability to go in and adjust their budget. They are requested to provide details, contract names and amounts for specific contracts. So like our Department of Real Estate and Asset Management would come in and identify their contractors that they have and their contracts that they have for things like janitorial services. If they have professional service contractors, they would identify them. It is an ask. Some departments do a better job of others than, providing a lot of detail and support for their asks. So, we spend a lot of time and a lot of back and forth trying to understand, especially when they have submitted for an enhancement request or a new program, trying to make sure that they've put everything in that they should be including in those requests. But they do have the opportunity to align it how they would like to see it and provide detailed explanations for their requests.
And Chairman Pitts, back to you just for a minute. That's why I was letting her get into the
Yes, sir.
minutia there, because I know that's why you hired her, right?
That's correct.
Okay. The way you've explained it to me is that with certain elected officials that are provided for under the Georgia Constitution, like the district attorney's office and the sheriff's department, these are elected officials, and our state constitution provides the sort of parameters of their authority and responsibilities, right?
That's correct.
For those, particularly those two, a sheriff and a district attorney, do you micromanage their budget, or is it fairly well left within their authority under the state constitution?
Well, they're what we call constitutional officers, and we have 3 or 4 of those. And then the district attorney is in a sort of a different category, but also now I'll have to defer to get the correct terminology from our county attorney. But constitutional officers believe that once their budget has been approved by the Board of Commissioners, then they are free to manage that budget any way they see fit. And that's because of this law, I suppose, that gives them that authority.
So you can't micromanage their spending once you've granted them the budget, appropriated the money to them from the general funds?
Probably not. And that's, I guess the answer to that would be no, we cannot.
But essentially, you don't have to appropriate money to them unless they can justify for you why they need it and what they intend to spend it for. The
Well-
line item listing that Ms. Whitmore just referenced.
Right, when the departmental budget comes to us and say, even with the constitutional officers, there are line items, but we fund the line items and that results in a total. But once we've approved it, they can disregard the line items that we have approved, and therein lies, I guess, a source of conflict from time to time.
Do you have a good grasp on exactly how much money runs through the DA's office budget every year? You know, 36.6 million comes from your general funds from the taxpayers of Fulton County. And then they have money that they get from these forfeitures and from a portion of fine money. And then they may have grants, et cetera, both state and federal on top of that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then the state itself funds a certain number of positions, including the district attorney's salary and a certain number of assistant district attorneys based on the number of judges in the circuit.
That's my understanding, yes, sir. But we do not monitor that. And what we are aware of is that the 36 plus million that comes from the general fund, and rarely do we keep up with how much they've received from grants or fines and forfeitures and things of that nature.
Right. That's something that's within the control of the district attorney's office.
Correct.
Okay. Do they ever report that amount to you? I mean, it would seem in the course of making a budget request to you, they need to show a need for money, and that would necessarily require them to show you what they're getting from other sources to figure out what they need from you.
As a matter of course, that is not provided to us. Now, whether that is made available during the budget process with staff, I'm not sure.
We will look at other sources that they have available when they're asking for an enhancement to see if there is another source that could be used instead of the general funds. And I guess I would just like to perhaps add a little clarification to what the chairman just said about the other sources of funds. Those are maintained on the county's financial system. So we do have the federal asset forfeitures, the confiscated assets. There are buckets of those. They are presented to the board in the special appropriation grant funds. The board, there is no reporting that comes forward to the board on those. And, you know, because the board isn't authorizing those resources, they come from other sources. There isn't a lot that comes back to the board on those. From a grant perspective, like a federal grant perspective, we do present the grant applications that are made on our grant activity report to the board. And again, the grant activities and reporting are captured on the county's financial system and are included in our required single audit report each year. So that's the reporting. But there is no other reporting that is completed on those funds by the district attorney to the Board of Commissioners.
But from your accounting standpoint, you're the chief financial officer. When these funds from whatever source get deposited in a bank account, somebody's got to make an entry, the deposit was made and where it came from?
Yes, sir. So if resources are received, then they are presented over to the county treasury. They're deposited, and within these funds, then the spending credit, if you will, is provided to the agency that's receiving the funds. We have, multiple agencies that receive federal asset forfeiture funds and confiscated asset funds. So we track it by each department within those funds, and when the resources are received, they are given credit for them. On the grants, many of the grants are, of course, drawdown grants. So we're spending the county's resources first and seeking reimbursement from the granting agency. So whatever the required drawdown process is, our grants administration office in the finance department would be involved in assisting and facilitating the the financial reporting requirements. Programmatic reporting requirements are typically managed directly by the department or agency that has received the grant. But our grant administration unit will ensure that the whatever periodic required financial reporting is complete, and that the drawdowns are completed on a timely basis so that the county is not fronting that money for too long of a period of time.
And tell me what you just referenced, a single audit. What did you mean by that?
That's the audit that any entity that receives a federal grant is required to have completed on an annual basis. Our external auditors complete the single audit. It is a specific audit of all federal and state grant funds.
And is that broken out between your various county agencies and departments, including the district attorney's office?
Yes, the auditors have a requirement to identify major programs and audit on a risk basis, and so they determine which programs may get a more thorough and very specific audit process, but all of the grants are included, and all of the information that they ask for is provided to them as part of that single audit process.
Is that a written document report that you would receive every year?
The single audit?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And is that a requirement of each agency, including the district attorney's office, to provide the requested data and information to the auditor?
It is, yes.
By reviewing that, are you able to pretty well track all of the spending of grant funds anyway by the district attorney's office?
At a summary level.
Right.
It's not detailed. It just basically gives you, the total amounts.
Of what was received and
Expended,
what was
yes,
spent?
sir.
Does it give a category of the spending?
I believe that it's just listed by the individual grants.
Okay. Would that explain or reveal to you what personnel was paid for by specific grants?
It is not, the report itself is not at that level of detail,
All right.
no.
Is that provided to you in any way? In your role as CFO, do you get to see, which employees are funded by county money versus a federal grant versus a state grant versus a combination?
Yes, that information would be available to me. Again, when those grants are awarded and received, we establish the budget. If personnel expenses are included in the grant award, then the budget office will work with the recipient agency to ensure that the appropriate positions are created and established within the grant to ensure that they comply with whatever the application and the budget document that was presented to the granting agency includes.
And we've had conversations before this morning as you've tried to explain to me some of these different funding sources. It seems to me like on a lot of the staff attorney or assistant DA positions and other investigators and other folks that are working for the DA's office, that their salary is paid partly by the state with a local supplement, a county supplement. Explain that to our committee so we can figure this portion out.
Yeah, there are a handful of positions, assistant district attorneys, deputy district attorneys, investigator, maybe some legal assistants, who are paid by the state and supplemented by the county. So we call them state supplemented positions. And I'm not 100% on what the total number is right now. I think it's somewhere between 15 and 20. I'm not sure which of those are filled. So that's part of the information that we have yet to finalize to be able to provide to you.
Still trying to break that out exactly.
Yes, sir.
Paid.
Yes, sir.
So what about a employee of the DA's office's health insurance benefits? Is that paid by the state of Georgia, the state health benefit plan, or by Fulton County's health plan?
Positions that are 100% county funded positions are paid by the county. I will have to have one of the supplemental positions pulled. At one point in time, under a previous district attorney, some of them were receiving county benefits. I'm not certain at this point with DA Willis if they are also receiving county benefits or not. So I will actually need to go and pull that information.
And what about retirement funds? I know state employees are eligible for state retirement benefits. Do you have county retirement benefits for these county employees?
Fulton County has a closed defined benefit plan that closed in 1999. If there are employees in the district attorney's office who were employed by the county and participated in that plan and chose to stay in it, then they would be eligible for a defined benefit pension upon their retirement from the county. We also have, since that point in time, had a defined contribution plan in place that is available to full-time county employees. We have amended it over time to include or exclude certain groups. As we've learned, certain groups have been added into and out of other plans. So full-time employees have the benefit of that defined contribution plan.
And that would be at the cost to Fulton County taxpayers rather than state taxpayers?
Yes, sir.
So there may be 2 or 3 of us working as assistant DAs under Ms. Willis, and if I'm one of the state-funded positions, I would be receiving a different type of health insurance plan possibly and a different type of retirement plan than my colleague that's a supplemental employee that's funded by the county alone.
Possibly, yes, sir.
Okay.
And I will confirm that in our response.
What about folks that are independent contractors of the DA's office, like a special counsel, special assistant DA? How are they paid?
They are treated as professional services and paid as if they were a county vendor.
And do you consider them then a county employee or a county vendor or an independent contractor?
A independent contractor with a receipt of a vendor payment.
And as far as benefits from those type of independent contractors, would they receive any health insurance benefits or retirement benefits at all?
No, sir.
Okay. And do you, in the county level, have any control over what they're paid?
No, sir. That's at the discretion of the district attorney.
does the district attorney, and I'm going to shift back to you, Chairman Pitts, have to advise you of what's going on with these independent contractors that are being hired?
No, sir.
Okay. Do they have to request funding from you? And is that in the budget request, that I need X amount for a specific prosecutor, or as a category of assistance that I need to get from an independent contractor?
Well, let me try to answer that question this way. First of all, we have what's called outside counsel, and I'm going to make a distinction between outside counsel and a special prosecutor.
All right, explain that one to us.
Right. An outside counsel is hired when the county attorney determines that there's a need for assistance. She then, in this case, she will make a recommendation to the board and explain why she needs outside counsel. She makes that recommendation to us. And if we agree, and that's typically done in executive session, and if we agree, then we will take a public vote and authorize the hiring on the recommendation of the county attorney of outside counsel. And we have a range, an hourly rate. I'm not sure what that hourly rate is, nor whether that's really relevant, but there's a range that we pay outside counsel. And that's different from a special prosecutor.
Would outside counsel have anything to do with criminal prosecutions, or are they representing the county's interest in other type of matters? You know,
Joe. Yeah, I got the right answer. I was going to, I thought I was right, but I wanted to make sure. We don't hire outside counsel for criminal matters.
all right, that would be for dealing with other county legal matters that you needed extra help from somebody other than the county attorney's office.
Primarily civil versus criminal.
So who's the brains back there behind you you're consulting with,
It's our
Chairman?
county attorney,
And what's her name?
Sue Joe.
Sue Joe.
Yes.
And that's S-O-O and then J-O?
Yes,
I got
sir.
that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Ms. Joe, I may ask you to share some information with us. You're not under subpoena and it won't be sworn testimony, but if it comes a time where you can help sort of enlighten us, you just let us know, or else you can keep letting the chairman know. All right, so those outside counsel have to be approved by the county commission.
Correct.
And it's done on the recommendation of the county attorney.
Correct.
Or the request, and that would specify the pay rate that those folks would be paid.
That's correct.
All right, and the second category?
Second category would be a special prosecutor. And the special prosecutor is, I believe I'm correct on this, that the district attorney has sole discretion under very narrow circumstances, and I don't know how to define narrow circumstances, but that's how it's been described to me, to hire, independent of the board of commissioners, a special prosecutors.
Okay.
That's her decision and her choice.
But that
And we
would,
have nothing to do with that.
you wouldn't have anything to do with the selection or approval of that counsel?
That's correct.
Okay. But you would ultimately be paying for that counsel through the general appropriations bucket in the budget that you approve for the DA's office.
For special prosecutor?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm told, yes.
All right. And you're told that by your chief financial officer?
Yes.
That's her job to know?
Yes.
Okay. On those people.
We wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know the name of them
No.
or how much they're being paid?
No.
But you're going to see a line item on an audit at the end of the year showing how much that person was paid?
Is that correct?
They're typically captured as professional services expenses.
And is that in a group or individual?
It's professional services object code within the district attorney's budget within the general fund.
All right, that's, didn't educate me. I'm wanting to, does that mean if Ms. Willis hires 15 special prosecuting attorneys and pays them $10 million, that's all you see is that $10 million was spent for that type of personnel? Or does it give you how much Mr. Wade got, how much Mr. Johnson and Ms.
So our system captures all of that, but as far as how our reports roll up, at the object code level, you would just see the total amount. You would have to actually go into the accounting system to extract the details of the payments for professional services, because there may be more than just legal services or outside or special prosecutor services within the object code for professional services.
You got professional services, it doesn't even delineate how much is attorneys and how much is a janitor.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if I want to find out how much Mr. Wade was paid for his services as a special prosecutor, who has that data? I want to issue a subpoena to find that out. Do I give it to you as the county and you can discern that? Or do I have to go to whoever hired this professional service provider?
The county actually has an open government platform. You could go to our open checkbook and you could search by the name, and it would pull up the name of any vendor that matches that description, and you could find, payments that way. So you could go in and type in Mr. Wade's name or the name of his law firm, and you would be able to pull those documents. You could also submit an open records request to the finance department, and the accounts payable team would pull the details and provide that documentation. Or you could subpoena probably the district attorney or any member of her staff that is involved in their internal accounting and vendor payment process.
Is it?
It was
only-
included in my subpoena.
Right, so that's my question.
Yes.
Can you find that information?
Yes.
Or do I have to go to the DA who may not provide?
No,
it?
we have that information.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And you can tell me the recipient by name of these professional services payments?
What we provided today was specific to Mr. Wade. We are working on, the request also included any other attorney, so we are still working on that. Our process is we are searching now through all of the transactions within that professional services object code, pulling out the ones that appear to be legal firms and pulling the underlying supporting documentation to determine if they were in fact legal firms and if those expenses are responsive to the subpoena, and if so, they will be provided.
And I know I might sound a little lawyerish here. I don't mean to be hounding you, but I'm wanting to make sure that I address that subpoena to the right person. And I'm told you are the bomb. You are the answer to financial questions in Fulton County, or can get them. If I'm wrong, help direct me where I need to submit additional subpoenas to track down that information.
No, sir. Submitting a subpoena to me is should be sufficient.
And I will say on the record, you have been very responsive, and I know it's a lot of data and information, and I appreciate your efforts to continue providing that to me.
Thank you.
You have been completely transparent and helpful in trying to find things. So you said supporting documentation. What kind of supporting documentation would there be for a professional services payment to a law firm?
Typically, their billing statement.
Do you have supporting documentation to show you a contract with them, with the independent contractor between the legal services provider and the district attorney's office or the county?
The contracts typically are not provided as part of the supporting documentation. It can be requested, but
From you or from the DA's office?
if I have it, I will provide it. If I don't have it, and it's something that I can't get, then I wouldn't be able to provide it.
Okay. Because this is sounding to me kind of like the Wild West. Very little control from Fulton County over a $36 million budget. You don't know how much of that is spent on professional services, who is hired, how much they're paid per hour, what their total compensation is, yet you're being asked to provide $36.6 million a year that you know encompasses a number of those type of independent contractors that you're funding with no oversight or control, right?
Yeah, the Board of Commissioners has no oversight over the district attorney.
So your only control is the power of the purse, whether you continue funding money that can be used for those purposes, or whether you restrict that funding. Is that fair, Chairman Pitts? I guess that's really your question.
Could you repeat that, Mr. Chairman?
So your only control is the power of the purse, is either granting or rejecting requests for additional funding from the DA's office.
That's correct.
Okay. And that has to be based upon assurances presented to you by the DA as to why she would need particular amounts of funding?
Right. The DA can come before the board and make a request at any time, and we would consider the request, and if we agree, then we'll grant it.
Right.
If we disagree, then we won't grant it.
And in that request, do you require her to give some specifics? Some who I want to hire, why I need to hire somebody, how much I want to pay them, what's going to be the cap on their
We don't
service?
get into that sort of detail. I mean, she'll would make a case as to why the need is there and what it would cost. But as far as individual names and what the compensation for a given individual would be, we don't get that kind of detail, nor do we ask it.
Did DA Willis ever make a request for specific funding for a special assistant DA, prosecuting DA, for for Mr. Wade?
Not to my knowledge.
And is her position that she doesn't have to ask or provide that information to the county in order to make a supplemental funding request?
Well, again, with respect to the special prosecutor, that's solely the purview of the district attorney, unlike the outside counsel.
All right. But you fund the district attorney based upon her stated needs or her request for funding, right?
Correct.
Okay. In her budget request, does she have a category for special prosecutors?
I don't recall seeing a special category.
Mr. Chairman, I guess I would have to say that she, as have prior district attorneys, have asked for resources, trial expense resources,
Right.
without it being specific to X amount for a special prosecutor or X amount for expert witnesses or, things like that. I think that it's been more like we know we have these major prosecutorial matters that will be moving forward and will require
Additional funding.
additional resources. But I don't recall there being any specific line item details necessarily associated with that.
All right, so we heard testimony at a previous meeting that there was a team of at least 10 assistant DAs working on an election interference case, and at least 3 special counsel that are being paid as independent contractors, including Mr. Wade. Was that ever described to the county commission in any of the funding requests?
I don't recall that coming before the board.
So she never came to you and said, I'm going to need a lot of money here to conduct this prosecution of, now there's 16 different defendants on a, I'm going to call it the election interference case. Was that ever expressed to the county commission that that's part of why you were asked to give $36.6 million?
Again, not with that level of detail. So again, trial expenses.
Just generically, not even for the type of prosecution?
I want to say for the 23 budget, and I will have to go back and verify this, that there was some communication where she identified a need for resources because she expected to have to retry a case that had been a high-profile case, as well as the gang matters that she has. I think there are a couple of those, and the elections, the elections interference matter as well. But again, it was a lump sum, not specific with line item details.
Right. So you think that was in her budget request perhaps in 23? Are we talking about Young Thug trial that's been it's gone on forever and ever so far, or different gang-related?
I believe there is more than one gang-related, large-scale prosecutorial matter. But yes, sir, that would be one of them.
And you think she may have also itemized the election interference case would require additional funds, or categorize that as an area of needed funding?
Yes, sir. Again, I would have to go back and look. Well, I don't, because.
You don't have to go back anymore. You've got your right-hand woman right there to help you.
So, yes, sir. That was Sabrina McTier, the county's budget manager. So this is from the 23 budget enhancement request. And the description says, and I'll just read it, the general rule, the more complicated a case, the more likely expert witnesses, e.g. professional services, are needed. That was in parentheses. State versus Tex MacGyver has been remanded to this office. This case alone cost $675,000 in professional services. I have this case and several anti-corruption cases that are being litigated in 23. It is sufficient to enhance this budget, and the request was $1.1 million.
So that was for Tex MacGyver and any other public corruption case?
Yes, sir. So that's the kind of description that I was perhaps not doing a very good job of,
No, you're doing great.
expressing, but
You're doing great. And as far as your recollection, Chairman Pitts, is that she never named that she would need a special prosecutor on any election interference case.
Not that I recall, sir.
Certainly never told you the names of who she might be hiring or how much she was going to have to pay them.
Not that I recall, sir.
Did she make other budget enhancement requests back in 2023, 21, or 22? I can't remember exactly when she was sworn in. Y'all know that?
Madam DA was sworn in and began her term in 2021. So we did receive enhancement requests from her for the 22 budget cycle, the 23, and the 24.
Okay. What was the $5 million enhancement request for clearing up homicide backlogs. Do y'all recall that? That was testified to here last meeting.
That was a request that came through in the middle of 2021. She requested additional staff to support a number of items, the outstanding homicide situation being one of them. Ultimately, in 2021, through a budget amendment process that we call budget soundings, the Board of Commissioners did authorize her to have funding for an additional 55 positions.
Wow.
It was a mix of attorneys, investigators, and administrative support personnel. And in 21, the cost that was necessary to begin to onboard those positions, because she would not be able to do all 55 at one time, was less than $800,000. I think the budget soundings was $780,000 and some change. But the full annual cost for that is the $5 million. And so we built that in then to her 2022 budget with the full year funding for all of the positions that the board awarded her mid-year in 2021.
And was there any mention in that $5 million enhancement request that that would be needed for any type of public corruption investigation?
I will have to go back to the source document to confirm that.
What do you call that source document? Because I'm going to want to make sure I have adequately identified what I need to be produced.
I would call it a budget soundings request.
Okay. And can you provide those to me without me submitting an additional subpoena? I think they're included in what I've asked for. I may not have been as specific because I didn't know what to call it.
Yes, sir. I had intended to include the 2021 soundings information as part of the request for the budget information that was already included.
You can just follow up and get that to me or Secretary Cook at your convenience. And if you would do that for any of those sounding requests for 21, 22, 23, and 24, just to keep me up to speed. Because, Chairman Pitts, what I am hearing from you is that the Board of Commissioners never got any kind of specific request for additional funding to prosecute any election interference cases, other than that generic $1 million, in 23.
Not that I recall, sir.
And no specific information about who needed to be hired as an independent contractor or what they would cost. I understand Governor Barnes was too expensive, and I just didn't know if that's that y'all figured that out or she ruled him out for that reason.
No, not that I recall.
I am subject to hire in amount.
He's a gun for hire if anybody out there is paying attention, and pleasure to have you in the audience with us today, Governor Barnes. And I'm just wanting us to get a feel and for exactly how much oversight there is. It sounds like it's very loose as far as employment practices and expenditures for independent contractors.
Yeah, that information doesn't come before the board.
Right. Only you have to peel it out in these soundings and in the annual audit and in the budget submissions as she gives you the categories of what she needs.
That's correct. And when budget soundings come before the board, there's a little more detail and more specifics.
Right. Probably pretty difficult politically for you and the Board of Commissioners to reject a request for needed funding to clear up a backlog in homicide cases, right?
Well, I mean, we had such a tremendous number of cases that were so-called, had been there for up in the thousands. And we decided that the $75 million from the ARPA funds has already been referenced by Ms. Whitmore.
Right.
So in order to, to weed through, $75 million of the, I think we received a total federal allocation of about $206 million in ARPA funds, and $75 million of that $206 million went to the justice system.
Okay.
And the justice system meaning everything that the CFO has outlined.
So that was back in the fall of 2021. It was about the same time Mr. Wade was being hired. And it wasn't mentioned to you that any of the enhanced money was going to go towards Mr. Wade or any other special prosecutor to prosecute election interference.
No, it was my understanding that that $75 million was to be used for the justice system, and specifically, sort of specifically, to reduce the tremendous backlog that we had.
And there was a $5 million enhancement that was from county funds, not the Orca funds, or is that the same money?
Is that the same money?
No. The 5 million is general fund,
Okay.
county.
And in that request, that was on top of the Orca funds to get rid of the backlog of homicide cases.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir. She actually asked for over 100 positions. When she made the request, and the way in which we addressed it was, we already had the backlog program in development, and so we identified a certain number that would be funded through the backlog project out of the ARPA resources, and the balance we provided for out of the county's general fund.
And this is back in the fall of 2021.
Yes, sir.
2 years before her 1.1 million request for public corruption and Tex MacGyver.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did she ever report back to you the progress being made? What kind of bang you were getting for your buck? You're giving her tens of millions of dollars in either Orca funds or federal, state, county general funds to get rid of this backlog. Did she do it?
I don't recall any specific report back to the board from the district attorney. However, at each meeting of the board, we would receive an update on progress that was being made. That's accurate, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, sir. As part of our global pandemic response, we presented the Board of Commissioners with an update for a while at every board meeting, and then eventually at just one meeting a month, to update them on our progress using our ARPA resources, and specifically on the backlog project, showing total backlog cases, progression of those cases through the system. And so we've been reporting on that regularly up until February of this year due to our cyber incident. So we are almost ready to begin that reporting process. Again, the last report that we made of the progress of Project Orca was in January, at the second meeting of the Board of Commissioners in January, and that was for progress through the end of 2023.
So would that list the number of homicide cases that are pending and how many are being resolved on a monthly basis?
It doesn't list case type. It lists the total number of projects, the total number of cases by each of the players, if you will, the solicitor, in the magistrate court, the district attorney, and then Superior Court and State Court. So we kind of track the progress of the cases from the two prosecutors, from the solicitor and the district attorney, into their respective courts, and then we track the progress that the courts themselves are making in fully adjudicating the cases. So that information is all presented to the board in a chart and discussion, and what's happening, all the various different things that we had to do in order to, see that line make the progression that we were looking for.
So how many backlog cases were there? Do you have a ballpark figure how bad this got back in 2021? We're a year into the pandemic, courts are not trying cases. And old mouse. You got a full color report there. Is that my
Thousands.
notebook?
We'll get an exact number. It was,
We started, our drop date that we used to define our backlog cases was December 6, 2021. And we started with a total of 148,209 open and active cases in any stage.
That included solicitor's office that
Yes,
prosecutes
yes.
misdemeanors.
Across the justice
And the DA's
system.
office that prosecutes the felony offenses.
Yes, sir.
Does it break them out, how many are state court versus superior court?
The state court, the starting point for the state court was 20,124.
So the vast majority of them, or at least two-thirds of them. What's the superior court?
Superior court was 15,888.
Okay. Then you got magistrate courts as well, I guess. or-
Magistrate court was 39,435.
That can be everything from a speeding ticket to parking ticket, very minor things.
Variety of,
Okay.
okay, yes, sir.
What else you got, municipal court, I guess?
The Solicitor General had 56,462 at the starting point. And the District Attorney had 16,300.
Okay. Where's the 16.3 now, or at the end of 2023? Has the DA used all these millions to any good to catch up?
From our report in January, the District Attorney's number was 130 cases that were the original Orca. So this is only tracking the cases that were considered in the Orca backlog that started at 148. So again, these resources were only supposed to be focused on reducing those cases. There were still new cases, of course, that come into the system since that point in time.
Right.
And this report does not talk about those. This is specifically focused on those Orca cases.
Those new ones are not funded through the Orca funding.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
That makes sense.
Those two numbers that start
For who?
The start for the DA, you started at 16,300 and ended up with 130.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that was from all of-
December 6th of 2021 through 12/31/2023.
And we can't discern whether they're dismissed cases, whether they're plea bargain cases, or trials to a verdict.
Not from this report, no,
Okay.
sir.
They just got out of the system, resolved one way or another.
So for the district attorney, they were either moved on to Superior Court, which is where her cases would typically go, which means she still has to then prosecute them. But what we were tracking is, the cases that she had where, they were still sitting in, per se, in her queue, if you will.
Yeah.
So from 16.3 down to 130, they either moved on into the further into the prosecutorial process, or yes, they were dismissed, or whatever the other term is that you would use when a court case doesn't progress, when a matter doesn't progress.
Did your reporting requirements for these Orca funds require any detail as to the successful completion of a case, whether there was a conviction or a plea, or they just dismissed it, or did they break it down for you that way? Or just one lump sum number of these cases are resolved, they're no longer in our system, in our queue?
We did not require that level of reporting to the Board of Commissioners. We do have, I believe, that level of reporting from our criminal justice system, but it's just not included in what we reported to the board.
And does that criminal justice system of Fulton County prepare a report giving those annual updates or dispositions of cases?
They have not. This is something that the executive team worked on. For Project Orca, there was a steering committee that was established that, like the chief judge of Superior Court, chief judge of state court, magistrate court, chief judge, the Clerk of Superior Magistrate Court. They all participated in the steering committee process. Our former COO, Alton Adams, guided them through that process. So there was no explicit reporting requirement for that detailed level of information made by the board to the group, but the board did want to see, you know, the results of their efforts. So, you know, Mr. Alton worked with the judicial partners in developing the information that was reported back to the Board of Commissioners.
So you think that criminal coordinating council, or whatever they're called, kept data that specific as to the outcomes of the cases?
I think it's in our justice, it's in our system and can be pulled out. I don't know. I didn't participate in those sessions, so I don't really know what they did with that
Who would you
information.
recommend me asking to pull that data out? Who should I submit a request for, ask to come testify to us?
Perhaps Mr. Adams, Alton Adams.
He's no longer the COO?
He is semi-retired. He is continuing to work with the county as a fee-based employee to help us move further down the road with the potential replacement jail project.
Mr. Adams, a fee-based employee? Does that mean he's still working just on an hourly basis?
Yes,
or
sir.
Kind of a consultant?